Hello and welcome, book lovers. You are tuned into the podcast of TRU, aka the Universe, your go to podcast for insightful conversation with remarkable authors. Today, we have a very special guest joining with us, David Vorhees, the talented author behind the book Brother Keeper. David, sir, welcome to the show. This is Anuj Tripathi, your host of the show. Okay, so, sir, we will be directly dive into the questions respecting your time.
Okay.
So, that what inspired you to write the book Brothers Keeper? Were there any specific experiences or moments that sparkled the idea of the book?
Well, for most of the stories, I got inspired basically through social media, seeing the events that happen on the news and people's reaction to them. And I thought, how could this get any worse? And then, of course, I came up with the answer and I started writing the stories. Um, Sundown and quarantine are direct correlations to what was happening during the 2020 COVID era with the a lot of racial tensions in our country, and with all the COVID misinformation about the disease and how deadly it was, or whether it was deadly or not. And so I wrote these stories, and they're dialed back. They're not like big expansive stories as far as there's a lot of people or they cover a large city or thing. They're very intimate with very specific families, and the whole point of the whole theme behind Brothers Keeper is family betrayal. And I used those themes of COVID and the racial tensions to create family dynamics, how do I, extremely tense family dynamics. And then that would then go overboard. One of the stories, A Mother's Love, is actually, that one's about the only one that's even loosely based on my experiences. As the main character, Angelo, or Andy, as he goes by, he's former Navy, just like I was.
Yeah.
He was stationed out in the San Francisco Bay Area, just like I was. And he didn't get to see a lot of the sights and stuff like that because he was busy running around with his friends all the time and they never wanted to do that. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. I was running around with a lot of my friends and I don't regret any of it, but I wish I would have gotten a chance to see some of the stuff that I didn't get to see. So he went back there to do that, and that's where his story takes off.
Yes, sir. Sir, the name Brothers Keeper. I'm just curious to know what was the idea behind this.
Well, I've always found that it's best to name the book after one of the stories that's in the actual book. And since this is a collection of 6 stories, all about family, Brother's Keeper, the Bible verse has to do with am I my brother's keeper? Um, that goes along with everybody, just family, whether or not they're taking care of each other and things like that. The actual story, Brother's Keeper, actually has to deal with 2 brothers who are twins. One is autistic and can't live by himself, and the other, well, let's just say he's not the nicest of people when it comes to outside activities. And they hire a young woman to basically help take care of his brother. So she represents the brother's keeper, as well as does the non-autistic brother, but as well as the family dynamic and large.
Yes, sir. So, were there any challenges that you encountered while writing the book? As you have said that you write in COVID days.
Yeah, the biggest challenges is writing this book was the the material was very dark, and a lot of the characters in it I don't have firsthand knowledge of, especially with the first story, Sundown. I don't know racial tension. I've never actually been biased due to my race or anything to that effect. So in this story, that does take place, and writing it from that perspective helped me gain a new perspective of that particular issue as well. But I've never written. There's stories in here written from women's perspectives, which obviously I'm not a woman, and it's just tapping into those mindsets made it were the most difficult part.
Okay. So when did you have started writing this book? In the COVID time only, in 2020 or after 2020?
I actually did. I actually did start writing it in 2020. It took me a while to get all the stories written and put together and make sure everything was good to go and proofread and edited and all that before I was able to release it, which was just last October.
So what was the writing process, as you have said that these are the stories from social media that inspired you. So what was the writing process and how did you complete the book?
Well, for me, the writing process is really broken up. I write when I write, I sit down and I can see the scenes playing in my head, and I'm basically just copying onto paper or onto the computer what I'm seeing into my head and what I'm hearing. The conversation. It's almost like I'm watching from outside looking in. Like when I say that, it's a little bit difficult because I do have a full time job, so I'm at work and I'm thinking about these stories, and I don't always get to write every day like I want to. So I try to write on my days off. Um, that time would be difficult because like one of my characters in my story, my son is autistic. So I have a 12-year-old autistic son, and during the summer when he's home, it's hard to write. That's why I
Yeah.
usually write during the when he's in school. So just trying to find the time to write is very difficult. But when I sit down to write, I just sit down. I'll turn on some classical music because that helps me focus, and maybe I'll turn on some other ambient sounds if I need to. If I and I just kind of like tune the world out, and I just start watching the movie in my head and start copying it.
Okay, that's great to know, sir. You have also written three books as of now: Abigail's Odyssey, if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
pronouncing it wrong, and The Feast
That's
and The Brother Keeper. Which one is your personal favorite? I just want to know.
I Abigail is I have to say might be my personal favorite right now, due to the fact that when I wrote that in mind of my grandchildren and stuff. So they my other stories with the feast or the brother's keeper, young kids really shouldn't read it. But with Abigail's Odyssey, even though it's a little darker and it's got a little a little bit of darkness to it, 12, 13 years old, they could read that book easily. Plus, I'm also writing the sequel to Abigail's Odyssey.
That's great. The Feast has won some awards, and I have also seen that this one is your most uh, sold books. Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
what was the story behind this book?
Okay, so I've worked in factories since I got out of the Navy, and one of the things that I like to do is when we're sitting around, whether it be on an engine line or I'm working on a press, and I've got friends around me, we're talking. I'll tell stories to kind of help pass the time a little bit. And they were telling me that I need to write these down. So one day I decided to start writing them down. And I'd come up with the concept that every story was going to fall on a major US holiday. So it does have a theme as well. And I just, because what, if it wasn't for my coworkers, I probably never would have sat down and actually started writing it. But yeah, I sat down and one day and I started writing it. The feast was the title story was the first one I wrote. And man, it took me probably about a week to write in total. And it was I loved it and haven't stopped since.
Sir, if I can ask that you have said that you are in Navy,
I was, yes.
yeah. So I want to know more about your writing things and all, book publishing.
Well, ever since I was a ever since I was a child, I made up stories. I've created stories, whether it was playing with action figures as a kid but it just never left. Like some people, my oldest son has never like really explored imagination that way. He likes to use his imagination to build things. I was always carrying out stories with mine, and I ne- I've always thought about being a writer. Ever since I was a little kid, I thought about it. I just never thought I would be capable of it. I never thought I'd actually be good at it. Um, and even in the Navy, I write short stories or poems and stuff. I can't tell you where those stories are now. They're long gone. But I I've always wrote a little bit. I just never had the confidence in myself to actually do anything with it until I wrote The Feast. Now, actually, a little bit before that, because I did have a job briefly as a small town reporter for a newspaper, for a local newspaper.
Yes.
And that right there, some of those stories I wrote really well too. So that gave me the confidence to actually sit down and do it. And rest is kind of history. I'm not going to stop either.
Yes, sir. Apart from writing, are you also on reading that you have any particular author or books that you are inspired with?
Yes, I love reading Stephen King. He's probably my favorite author of all time, followed closely by Edgar Allan Poe. I could sit down and read those guys all day long. Um, Dan Brown is another one. But the one thing I like about Dan Brown is his speed. Like when you sit down and you write and you read his books, you're done. Like it feels like within a couple hours because it just never stops. It's a very fast pace. With Stephen King, as much as I love his books, he has some parts of his books where it starts to slow down, and you're like, okay, come on, let's keep going. It's got to force yourself to read it. Um, but once he gets going, it's nonstop too. And I just wanted to be able to write stories that people can sit down, read within like an hour, but still think about for weeks later. And that's what I think I've been doing that because I've had many people tell me they still haven't gotten my stories out of their head months after reading them.
Yes, sir. Sir, as I'm not, I'm more of a reader kind of guy. So, just my personal question that if I start reading your book, am I getting bored as of now? Bored to
I would
fall.
say no.
Yep.
I would say no. You're gonna read right through it because they're not long. I don't make my stories super long. It's almost built for the age of YouTube and TikTok. People who have the shorter attention spans can go grab it, read a story, put it down, come back to it later. If you can put it down.
That's the only problem. That's the only problem that
Yeah.
stories are just too much, and I don't have
Yeah.
that much of time to read all this one and then to decide.
A lot of a lot of people don't. We've gotten very busy in our lives in this world, and sitting down to read for 4 or 5 hours a day to get through a book in 2 weeks to a month, that's not happening anymore. It's or very little. If you could sit down and read for half hour to an hour at night and get a story finished, and that's what people want to do. Just one little story that okay, I can come back to it tomorrow and read another story, or maybe in a couple of days when I have more time.
Yes, sir. Sir, do you have any upcoming projects for future plans in the world of writing?
I I do. I am working on a sequel to Abigail's Odyssey called Abigail's Wish, and it is about her. Her mother has passed away, and she's dealing with that grief.
Okay.
And she ends up going to yet another dimension, like she did in the first book. And I won't let nothing go away, let nothing go here after that. But there's going to be a little bit more. How do I put the dire straits for her in this particular story? I also have another one about a village, and it's a normal, average village who's never really seen a whole lot of bad things happen in their entire time. But all of a sudden, over a 10-month period, people just start dying. They're getting murdered. Guys are going into work and shooting people up. Boyfriends are killing girlfriends. And it seems like it's out of the blue over this 10 to 12-month period of time. And the sheriff, who's battling his own demons, has to try to figure out why and stop it.
Okay, that's great to know. So, what are the messages do you hope that readers will take away from your book, Brother's Keeper?
Oh, with Brothers Keeper, just be better towards each other, be better to everybody because you never know what it could lead to. You know, we horror writers, horror movies, everything, the horror genre always shows the worst possible outcomes that could happen. But people, it's sometimes it's a little bit of fun, it's a little bit of this, but it's also we could show you, hey, if we keep going down this path, this is where we're heading. And if you don't want to head to this path, then we need to be better as human beings towards each other.
Yep. So that's how we end this podcast. We don't have that much of a list of questions, and we just keep it that much short. And I just love talking to you, sir.
Talking to you too. It's been great.
Yes, sir. Sir, as you have worked with us with TRU, what are your experiences and any feedback you want to give us?
Well, it's been great working with you guys. You guys have been very prompt. You communicate well with me, and let me know what's going on. And when we're doing this, it's been prompt and to the point. And honestly, I've enjoyed it a lot. Been
Thank,
great.
thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. We can't wait to read your book as I haven't read your book as of now. My team has did it and they made the reviews and all, but I haven't personally read it.
I will say this: that from today until June 13th, my all three books are free e copies on Amazon.
That's great news. That's great news. We will post it out on our Instagram also.
All right, thank you.
Okay, sir. So thank you so much, sir, for coming to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And you guys can also have a copy of Brothers Keepers. So go and grab it on your Amazon.com. Till 13th, it is free. You can get happy reading. Thank you so much, sir.
Bye.